What up, brawlers? Welcome back to Throwin Hands. We got another special episode for you guys today. Alongside me is Daniel Woods, per usual. But we have another special guest on today, Julian Erosa, UFC Contender. How are you doing today, my man?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All right, so we're just gonna hop right into it. So, how'd you get your start in MMA? Like, what made you want to do this, or like, what martial arts did you start out with? Like, what made you get to this point?
I actually have no background in any kind of mixed martial arts or wrestling or boxing or anything. I was just a skateboarder, snowboarder, young kid that just had gotten into some street fights when I was about 17, turning 18, and me and my dad used to watch the World Extreme Cage Fighting, the WEC, before the UFC would back in the day when I first started training, maybe 12 years ago, the UFC would have like a pay-per-view once every 4 or 5 months. So the free fights were on the WEC, so me and my dad started watching that, and my dad thought I kind of was built like Donald Cerrone, and he's like, maybe you should try some of that fighting stuff. And I was like, maybe I'll check out to see if we have a MMA gym. And sure enough, in the small town that I was from, Yakima MMA, went and checked it out, and kind of fell in love with it from there.
Earlier in your career, you came up in the Pacific Northwest, like you said. You're from Yakima, Washington, and then fought a lot in the cage sport promotion. Early in your career, kind of working through the regional circuit, what was that early stage of your career like?
It was I had 10 amateur fights within like a year and a half. It was 10-0, and then my coach told me I could turn pro. And then, I was doing really well as a professional over in the Northwest. I thought it was going to be a huge difference from going from amateur to professional, but I realized that, especially at the beginning stages of being a professional, you're just kind of fighting some of the better amateurs out there, and some guys can turn pro and really not necessarily need to be there yet. You can turn pro anytime you want and have no experience, and, you could have a losing record. So, you definitely want to make sure your skill sets are where they need to be when you turn pro. So, even back then, it was like, you were just kind of fighting the tougher amateurs, in the beginning stages of being a pro. I mean, it's crazy now to see some of these kids that are still amateurs that I train with down here in Vegas that are like 3 or 4 times better than I was when I turned pro. I had 10 amateur fights, but I was pretty green as a MMA fighter. I'd only had about a year and a half of training once I had turned pro. Some of these kids down here have brown belts before they're having their first pro fights. These guys have been training for 5, 6, 7 years before they even have their first pro fight. So it's a huge step up in competition, nowadays compared to how it was when I first turned pro about 12 years ago. Or no, I turned pro about 11 years ago. Yeah, it's just I think it was a smooth transition from going from amateur to professional. I was 9-0 as a pro before my first loss, and always had a really decent record through my entire pro career. And so it was a pretty easy transition. But nowadays it's a whole different ball game. These kids, they have purple, brown belts. I just got my purple belt, and not to say that I should have been already a purple belt years ago, but it's crazy how some of these kids, some of the skill sets they have before they even have their first pro fight. But I would say it was a pretty easy transition back then from going amateur to professional.
Okay, so cage sport, you win the featherweight belt, and then you get an invite onto the Ultimate Fighter for Team Uriah Faber. How did your relationship with the people there and maybe even Uriah Faber influence the way you fight or influence you in general?
Well, the Ultimate Fighter, you're only on there for like 7 weeks. So, and there's only so much, some of these coaches are going to be able to show you and teach you with that amount of time. And for me, it was different too, because I was in the competition the entire time I was in the house. So, it was more about making sure things were sharp. My weight was on point and just staying healthy. I really enjoyed how Faber and his the whole alpha male guys had it was almost like they had series for everything. Like it was they had the stand up series, they had a grappling series, they had tie clinch series, stuff like that, like where they would build off of things. And it wasn't like sporadic where one day you're drilling Kimuras and the next day you're drilling like a flying knee. Like it was all pretty organized, and that's one thing I did like about the way he was teaching things. But honestly, it was really hard for me to absorb a lot of techniques because I was in the competition the whole time. For 7 weeks, I fought 4 times, so I was more focused on making sure my weight was good and that I was healthy. Getting beat up day in and day out on top of fighting, 4 times within that amount of time. It was definitely hard on the body. So more focus on the recovery. But those guys are super cool, man. I really jived well with a lot of those guys, and I'm still friends with a lot of the guys. I train with Joe Benavidez every day now. He's fighting this next weekend, so for the title a rematch. And I don't know if his opponent got pulled for the coronavirus or not, but Lance Palmer, I talked to him all the time. Faber, he shouted me out my last fight too. So I kept in contact with some of those guys, and they're a bunch of good dudes and have a good way about training as well. So for me, it was more about staying on top of the weight and being healthy on the Ultimate Fighter. So it was a little more difficult for me to absorb all the stuff that they were training and showing us.
After growing up watching the WEC and that kind of being part of your introduction to MMA, when you did get onto the Ultimate Fighter, what was it like having your coach be somebody in Uriah Faber that was such a big face for the WEC, somebody that I'm sure was on a lot of the cards that you watched?
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. That was one of the first times I had been surrounded by guys I've seen in the UFC, like Cody No Love, obviously McGregor, Faber, Chad Mendez, TJ Dillashaw. Some of those guys were there for only a couple of days, but Touchy Philly, Josh Emmett was one of our coaches. He wasn't in the UFC yet. He's a big name there now at featherweight. And then just a lot of these guys, man. It was definitely kind of a shocker. A little bit of starstruck when I first got there because I'd seen these guys on TV so much, and Faber's just a huge staple of MMA, and especially at the WC back when I was watching it, and so kind of being able to kind of pick their brains and just kind of see how they go about doing things, whether it was small things like dieting, cutting weight, training day in and day out, recovery, stuff like that. It was really cool just to see these guys at the top levels and really try to pick their brains and understand how they go about doing it themselves and try to mirror that image.
So after the Ultimate Fighter, you make your UFC debut against Ishihara. What were your thoughts going into that fight?
At that time, I would say I was kind of, I really wasn't having the best training camps. I was, from a small town. I had, only a few solid dudes that I was going with, but I was kind of the man at my gym, and so I really didn't have guys that were mixing it up with me. I had kids that were there training with me, but the guy underneath me, I had at the time, I think I was 14-2 or 15-2 before I lost to Ishihara, but the guys underneath me at the gym, maybe had 1 or 2 pro fights. So it was I was coming from a small gym, and not to say that wasn't, that got me where I was at. And, I could have beat Ishihara. I should beat Ishihara, 9 times out of 10. It was a, kind of lack of preparation on my end. And, he was a southpaw, fast dude. He's a 35er, and he was fighting at featherweight at the time. He just didn't like to cut weight or whatever it was. But I was a lot bigger, a lot stronger than the guy. I could have taken him down. I could have won, various spots of the fight. I kept it in a spot where he was, strong and, I would say it was just a lack of preparation and game planning that I lost that fight. But leading up to that fight, I was confident. Coming off the Ultimate Fighter, doing pretty well in the Ultimate Fighter. Obviously I got knocked out by Artem, but I was 3-1 in the house. I felt like it was going to be the start. Ishihara was going to be the start of a good career in the UFC, and then end up losing that fight and getting cut. So that was disappointing that they cut me off my first loss. But it was just a lack of preparation on that fight.
So you said, you got cut after the loss to Ishihara in your first UFC fight. So you go back, you're fighting in cage sport again. You're fighting on these regional circuits a little bit more. Was your immediate mindset that you wanted to get back to the UFC? Was that the goal in your head from the time that you found out you were cut from the roster?
Definitely. Obviously there's other big organizations out there, but I'd already been in the UFC, and I was like, man, like they're gonna cut me off one loss. I mean, yeah, if I just work my way back, if I get some wins, maybe they'll bring me back. Because I've heard it, at that time I had heard through other fighters that if they got cut, they'd get a few wins and they'd come back to the UFC. And so, and obviously, cage sport was kind of my territory. So I figured if I got a couple wins, I'd be able to move on. But honestly, I just had a fire in my ass after getting cut from the UFC. I was just kind of upset about that, and so I took a 2-week notice fight against a pretty tough Northwest guy, Daniel Swain, and ended up TKOing him in between rounds. He couldn't answer the third round bell, and so I took that fight quick and cut a bunch of weight, beat him up, and then I fought this other kid, Austin Springer, who was actually tried out for the same season I tried out for. He lost to get in the house, so I figured if I beat him, that's another little bit of a decent guy to beat because he had made it all the way past medicals and all that kind of stuff. So obviously the UFC had been looking at him a little bit, at least to make it in the house. And so I ended up beating him for a belt. And then I should have maybe waited around a little bit longer and, maybe try getting the UFC from there because I had gotten 2 quick wins within like a couple of month period. But my coach told me that there had been an opportunity to go fight in London against that Paddy Pimblett kid for Conor McGregor's old belt. And I figured, you know what? If I win Conor McGregor's old featherweight belt from Cage Warriors, there's no way the UFC is not going to put me back in. So, I kind of took it on a month notice, and I had a really bad weight cut, but even then my cardio was still good, and ended up losing that fight by decision, which a lot of people thought I won that fight. I think I won the fight. After the fight, I watched it. It's a little closer than I had thought about when I was in the fight, but I had dropped the kid almost 2 times, or I dropped him twice, and he had him backing up the last couple of rounds the whole time. So, I thought I had won that fight, but he's a hometown kid. His manager is actually the promoter of Cage Warriors, and I didn't know that. I didn't know you could even do that. I think that's kind of a big no-no in the States, but I feel like I got robbed in that sense. But I should have finished him, and then I lost that fight, so it was back to the bottom for me again. So and then I fought a few more times and kept winning a few, and then would lose one, would win a couple, lose one. I think I was 6-2 or 5-2, and then got a Contenders fight. But I was always just thinking about getting back in the UFC, but I'd get a couple wins and then I'd lose a fight. And so it was just that was kind of the tough part about going back and not really having management either. I really had no management up until I moved out to Vegas, and I think that's what really hurt me.
Yeah. So, after you ran around in your local cage sport promotion and go to the Conor McGregor's old promotion, you get that Contender Series opportunity. Going into that competition, what was your mindset? What did you think was going to happen after you won that decision?
Are you talking about the Contenders fight?
Yeah.
Yeah. So leading up to that fight, I was super pumped just by getting the opportunity, and I'd been in the Ultimate Fighter I had fought 4 times in the Ultimate Fighter, so I knew I was going to be fighting in the same cage, the same kind of situation, so I felt like I had an advantage just in that, where I had fought in front of Dana and everybody, and where there really wasn't a crowd. It was just like your family and their family and their coaches and your coaches, and it was a small amount of people, and I felt like since I'd already done it a bunch, I'd had that a little bit of an advantage, and I just kind of knew the ins and outs of that place, and so I was already pumped about it. I knew the kid was going to be tough. Jamal Emmers, 13-3, I think, and they were building him up. I think I was a 2.5 to 1 underdog leading into that fight, which was stupid in my mind because I was like looking at our records, and at the time I was like 90% finish rate, and I have like way more experience than this kid. I was on the Ultimate Fighter, like been in the UFC already. How was this guy 2.5 to 1 favorite over me? He had won most of his, he was like a 50% finish rate guy. He was like, wrestled dudes down or beat him by decision or whatever. Me, I was like a 90% at the time. I was, choking everybody out or knocking them out, TKOing them. I didn't really have many decision wins, so I couldn't imagine why they had him such a favorite. And I think it ended up getting as big as like 3.5 to 1 on me. But it kind of gave me a little chip on my shoulder too. I was like, man, these guys, they must not know who I am, or they just don't understand. They just don't get, that I'm just as good as any of these other guys. And and big, strong featherweight too. And leading up into that fight, I was just confident. The weight was probably one of the best weight cuts I had. I had a lot of time for that fight. I think I had like 7-8 weeks for that. One of the best weight cuts, one of the best camps, no injuries. I mean, leading into that fight, I was about 90%, which is, most UFC fighters or most MMA fighters, if they could lead into a fight at 90%, that's like 100% for us. So, we're always banged up, bruised up, dealing with certain little injuries, but I think that was the least amount of, bumps and bruises I had to deal with leading into that fight. Just a really good camp. Everything was, I was firing on all cylinders, and, all my sparring was going good. And so I was really confident leading into that fight. Ended up knocking him out with a head kick, and that's the kind of head kick the UFC, you'll get a $50,000 bonus for. And so for me to knock him out, and that's the whole thing. That's the whole deal with Contenders. It's like you're supposed to, you show up there, and if you knock somebody out like that or you finish them, you usually get signed. And for me, I figured even if I just beat him because I was an underdog and they were really building him up, if I just beat him, even by decision, even if it's a boring fight, if I beat him, they know who I am. I've been in the UFC before, was on the Ultimate Fighter, did really well. I even got a bonus on the Ultimate Fighter because me and Mehdi had the best fight. Like, if I just beat Jamal Emmers, I'll get a shot. And for me to go out there and land that head kick and knock him out like that, and just the reaction on Dana's face and Sean Shelby and all those guys, I was like, man, there's no way I'm not going to get signed right now. And they passed me up, and I think it had a little bit to do with my management, and so I had to switch my management about few months after that, and I switched over to Jason House from the Radium Sports Agency, and literally within like 3 or 4 days, he got me a short notice fight to fight against Devontae Smith. But yeah, super confident about leading up into that Contenders fight, and I was disappointed not to get signed after doing so well. That I knew I had to change something, and it was my management, and I did that, and ended up getting a short notice fight again back in the UFC.
You talked there a lot about your finish rate, and you finished 21 out of your 24 professional wins. Without having, like you said, without having like a really long background in really any martial art, what was it like developing those skills early in your career to be so dangerous at any point in a fight?
Honestly, I would really have to just give it to the toughness and the cardio that those are the two skills that I've kind of acquired from not, obviously, like a lot of guys will get that toughness and that cardio, maybe if they're wrestlers or, and they're transitioning over, or a really good jiu-jitsu guy. But for me, I was a skateboarder, and, I was always been competitive whatever I did. So, I'd be skateboarding for, hours on end, and snowboarding. I would snowboard all day and then go train afterwards. And just my cardio was always through the roof. And I was always just one of those tough guys. I would throw myself down a set of 10 stairs, 20 times to get a trick, and concrete's not forgiving, your training partners are a little easier on you than, falling on concrete over and over again. So I think just kind of that durability and that mindset that I wouldn't quit until I got something done on my skateboard, and it kind of transitioned really well to fighting, that I just wouldn't quit ever in a round, or in a fight, or just in training in general. I've always had that ability to kind of push through being tired and just outwork guys. And I think that's, and that always kind of equates into finishing guys. I have a lot of finishes. A lot of times what would happen is, I want to go out there and knock some dude out in one punch. It's happened before, but most of the time it would be in the second round, it'd be in the third round, I'd be catching these guys because, I've always been the guy that's always in that fight. It's almost like a Diaz guy where, you can never put Diaz out of a fight, and you always got to be worried about him. So it's kind of the pace and the push I always want to put in my fights. Where, and even just my last fight in the UFC, that's a perfect example of, and that really mirrored how I am in the training room. Was willing to bring the fight to the kid and ended up subbing him in the third round because, my cardio, my conditioning, and my toughness was able to put me in that position at that time in that fight. So, those are the two skills that I've really acquired over the years of all the sports and all the things that I've done to really put me over the top in that sense, fighting anybody really.
So, let's talk about your last fight. You were brought in as a late replacement for you replaced for Sean Woodson. It was about a week, right, that you were given notice, right?
They told me on Tuesday, and I fought on Saturday.
Okay, so what were the challenges that you faced going into that fight? Like, was the weight cut hard? What was the camp like?
You know, luckily I have managers. Luckily, my manager Jason is putting just as much work into what he does as I do in the gym, and that's the one thing that I praise him all the time about is he just he's working so hard, and one thing that he was doing for me was he was really keeping me posted about things like once the UFC got started again at the Apex Center, there was like 6 or however many weeks in a row where it was UFC fights every weekend. He told me, hey man, these guys are going to be running out of fights or fighters to fill these fights. So even though you're 1-4 in the UFC, I wouldn't give up on getting back in the UFC, man. They're going to need you. They're going to need guys, especially local guys that have their medicals done, that can make the weight and take a short notice fight. And I was like, so leading up to that fight, I was probably I was in just as good shape as I would have been in any fight camp because I was prepared. There was like probably about 6 to 8 weeks where I was just training every week, and then every single week that there was a UFC fight, I would treat that week as my weight cut week. So I'd be semi weight cutting, and not necessarily cutting weight. I'd be like water loading. I'd be keeping low on my carbs and my sodium, and I'd be training pretty hard, but I'd be taking it a little easy at the end of those weeks of training, just in case something popped up. And so I would say 3 or 4 weeks in a row before I fought, I was, doing my water loads, getting my weight low, and I was even trying to get my weight as low as possible on Fridays just to see where I was kind of sitting at, but this was stuff I was doing just to do it, just in case. And I think that's what really set me up really perfect for this opportunity because they told me on Tuesday, but it was like a fight camp for me. I'd already been training 6 to 8 weeks anyways, and they told me on Tuesday, had to do medicals Wednesday. But by that time, my water load was already going. I was already kind of getting low in weight. And then, Thursday I had to cut weight in the evening, and then Friday morning cut the rest of the weight. The weight cut was relatively easy. We ended up getting a few extra pounds. We did it at 150. And, I got as low as 48 and a half. So I was only 2.5 pounds away from making actual featherweight. So I could have done that if I had to, but, just having a good manager, but not only that, he put the work in just like I put the work in. I was putting the work in for the weeks. We're in the coronavirus. I was collecting unemployment, so all I was doing was training. So I didn't have to work. I had 100% focus on training, and so to take advantage of that was is what really set me apart from a lot of these other guys I was training with. Was just people were taking the coronavirus and the shutdown like it was a vacation. But for me, I did it in the beginning a little bit, but then I kind of got on track with everything, and because my manager was on top of me about it, and then my coaches were as well. So, Tuesday got heard about the fight. Wednesday did my medicals. Thursday cut some weight. Friday cut some weight. Fought on Saturday. So it was just like I had no really time to think about it. It was just go, go, go. Kind of a hurricane of events that happened, leading up to it. But it was great. I was prepared for it. The weight cut was easy, and everything kind of just fell into place.
So you go into this fight. It's against Sean Woodson, who a well-regarded prospect coming up at the time, and still a guy with some potential in front of him. You talked before. You fought Jamal Emmers on the Contender series, and I mean, he was a guy that was, like you said, getting hyped up as a prospect. Did you come in with a similar, I guess, mindset or game plan in this fight as you did in the Contender Series fight, or was this a totally new Julian Erosa coming back into the UFC here?
Yeah, I've always been one of those, like I said before, my cardio conditioning, my pressure, has always been kind of like, shining through mostly in the gym. And, one thing that I think I've slacked on a little bit in fights was not really turning it on early enough. And so, for this fight, I knew that he was going to be a game opponent. I watched, some of his fights before, and I knew I was going to have to switch it up and just make it really gritty in the beginning of the fight. And that way it'll set up these later spots in the fight for some of these, compromising positions for him. So I knew right away I was going to have to kind of get in his face. I was going to have to take some shots, give some shots. But the main thing for me was I was going to have to make it a fight. He wants to box. He wants to, go, jab for jab, maybe kind of do that game. but I knew I couldn't box this guy. He was, he's so long and rangy, which is absolutely nuts at the weight class, and how tall and lanky he is. But I knew I was going to have to get in his face, and I feel like in the first round he was, kind of keeping the tempo, and he was kind of keeping his range really well. But in the second round, you could really see me starting to put pour the pressure on him and really back him up throughout the entire second round. And I think that whole second round is what really set up that third round and set that choke up for me. And honestly, the Darsh choke always was in the back of my mind because I've been choking everybody in the gym with the Darsh choke. I'm built like perfect for it, the Darsh choke, and made a couple of little details, but I knew if I got a hold of his neck, it was going to be over. And not to say that that he couldn't have fought out of it in the beginning of a fight, and that's the risky thing too. So there's been other fights where I caught people in Darsh chokes and they fought out of it, and I might have gassed myself a little bit in some of those fights because of that. And so I figured if I was going to choke him, I was going to save it for towards the end of the fight because I knew he'd be a little tired, and I knew he wasn't going to give up on the feet. He's got like 50-plus boxing matches. He's a Golden Gloves guy, and I knew that he wasn't going to let me he wasn't going to give up on the feet. I would have had to put him completely out, and then, and even then I knew he was going to have a chin on him because he's a boxer, and I knew he was going to have some good movement that I might not be able to catch him with all the shots that I want to catch him with, or catch him with that knockout shot. So within those 15 minutes. So I knew that he wasn't going to give up on the feet, and that if I, later on in the fight, put him in a compromising position on the ground, that he would have a better, I would have a better chance of him giving up and giving the fight to me at that point. And I think you can even see that in the fight. I put him in that Darsh choke, pulled him to the ground, locked it up good, and you even see him pull his hand out, like almost waiting to tap. So, I felt like I gave him a position and an opportunity to, to get his way out of that fight. And, I think it was a hard fought fight or hard fought win for myself, but, just that's how I am, and that's really what I wanted to see in myself, was just see a translation from the gym to the fight. And that's exactly what you guys saw. What you see in that cage is what I do every day in the gym. That's all I really wanted, was to translate that over. And obviously I got the win, and, luckily for me, I was able to do that to him that night.
So speaking of the Darsh choke, it's become a much more popular submission in the MMA game in the past couple of years, especially with Tony Ferguson doing it multiple times. Can you attest to why the Darsh choke has become more popular over the past couple of years?
Yeah, honestly, I think when you're talking about arm and chokes, people are stuck in those positions. Like a lot of people try to do guillotines, but guillotines are so hard to finish. I mean, arm and ones are a little bit different, but people have gotten so good at rolling out of guillotines, and if you just have the neck, it's hard to control the body and the head. But when you incorporate an arm like an anaconda choke or a Darsh choke or head and arm choke, you kind of got somebody stuck. And so for me, the Darsh choke is such a money move, just because of my length. And I think a lot of long guys are being able to catch these anacondas and these Darsh chokes. And the good thing about the Darsh choke versus the anaconda is the anaconda, where you lock up, it's kind of in front of them versus behind them. When you get the Darsh choke, it's kind of behind their head, so it's hard for them to hand fight that. And so for me, I think honestly, just the game's always evolving. There was, back in the day, it was like guys would get caught with like, arm bars, and the guy, like weak arm bars from weak positions. And nowadays it takes, you might have to throw 3 or 4 submissions before you can even get someone close to getting choked or close to getting, submitted in any kind of submission. And so people are just getting a lot more crafty and a lot better nowadays. But for me, I feel like the Darsh choke really stops somebody from being able to defend it, especially compared to some of these other chokes that only you don't have arms that are incorporated in it as well. Like, I catch people in a lot of guillotines, but I would say I'm more like a 50-50 guy with the guillotine, because there's just people are getting so good at rolling out of those, and you don't really have control of them as much as you would with a Darsh choke. I feel like once I lock my Darsh choke on, 90% of the time in the gym, even with black belts and stuff, I'll get my Darsh choke finished. So, and honestly, that's just something I prefer. I'm built for it. Some shorter guys that can't get that grip never throw Darsh chokes. But guys like Tony Ferguson, who's built just like me, I'm a little bit smaller version, obviously. I'm a featherweight. He's a lightweight. But, I mean, if you look at our bodies, we're just nothing but arms and legs here. So for him, and that's one thing that I've always kind of mirrored myself, especially with my Darsh choke. And I think a couple Saturdays ago when I fought Sean Woodson, that was, almost a textbook version of like Tony Ferguson, coming up and getting the Darsh Choke on the feet and dragging him down and finishing. And that's one thing I take pride in. And there's a couple other Darsh Chokes I almost caught in fights before, and I was just so disappointed I wasn't able to finish it, but I got some details down about it a little bit better. And so I'm just so happy I was able to lock that up and finish it the way I did.
Yeah. So, what are you looking for your next fight, man? Like, who you thinking, or do you know what's up? Because did you get signed to another fight?
Yeah. So obviously the type of performance that I had, it gives me another opportunity with UFC. They signed me for a 4-fight contract, and if I would have lost, that fight against Sean Woodson, I don't think I would ever fought for the UFC again. But I thought that before when I fought Julio Arce, but my manager is, like I said, man, he's working harder than anybody else that I know. And so he's put me in positions, and he surprised me so many times by being able to get me these fights. And so, obviously having a performance like I did, helps my, my pursuit in the UFC and keeping, my job with them. And I got a bonus that night too, so that helps out. And so I'm hoping, I don't have a signed fight yet, but I'm looking forward to trying to fight in September sometime. I know the UFC after Abu Dhabi is coming back here, and they're just gonna be banging out fights, like weekend after weekend after weekend, and they're gonna have contenders on the week. It's gonna be contenders, UFC, contenders, UFC. It's just gonna be it's gonna be mayhem here in Vegas. So for me, I'm just staying in shape. I got a little cut on my eye that I've been dealing with, and so I haven't been able to train 100%, but I would say probably by next week I'll be back into training camp, and so I'm hoping to fight September. Talk to my manager about maybe possibly trying to fight a couple. One guy I had in mind was that Jordan Griffin. He fought in the same card that I fought. He was like the first fight, and he lost against a I can't remember the kid's name.
Yusuf.
Yeah. He lost against Yusuf, who was a 35er, taking a short notice fight. I think he's a 35er, right? Taking a short notice fight at 45 against Griffin, and Griffin looked all right out there. I actually thought Griffin might have won that fight, but regardless, I think it was a good matchup for me to fight Griffin. I'm a taller, bigger guy, and he likes to try to take people down. I've been used to that, and I got the range, and I really want to just showcase my abilities on the feet of keeping that range and against somebody shorter than me. With Sean Woodson, that guy had more range than me, so I kind of had to fight the shorter man's fight, but I really want to get someone in there that's willing to kind of bang it out. And what I've seen from Griffin is he's one of those kind of gritty dudes as well. And not only do I think it's a good fight for me, but it's also another good fight for me to showcase kind of my heart and my endurance and my durability, but also have an exciting fight. I don't want to have a boring fight. It's nice to win some of those bonuses. So he looks like a guy that's willing to, bang it out with me as well. So I was looking maybe to try to fight him, but no word about that. So I'm just, kind of laying in the weeds right now until my manager calls back. But he's busy, man. He's got so many guys in the UFC. He's over in Abu Dhabi right now, so I know he's got some bigger fish to fry as of right now. But hopefully soon I'll have some news.
All right, Dan, you got anything else?
Just one quick question. With you talked about how full the UFC schedule is the next couple months. With COVID-19 kind of shutting down most of the sports in the United States, the UFC is really the biggest show in the game right now. Do you see mixed martial arts being able to expand more into the public consciousness with everything that's going on right now because the UFC is so high profile in American sports right now?
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, if you're not a fan of the UFC, and let's say you like to watch basketball or baseball or whatever it is that's your ideal sport to watch, now there's none of those going on, and there's a lot of a lot of stuff that you can't do right now. So I think people's pastimes now are gonna kind of funnel their way into watching the UFC, even if that's like your third or fourth or fifth favorite thing to watch. That's the only thing that's going on right now, in the sports world. So I think it's it's definitely gonna bring more attention to the UFC, which is nice because, man, like after my performance last time, I went from, being kind of a laughing stock of the UFC, not necessarily a laughing stock because, I'm just talking about people that really don't know who I am, being 1-4, people like, doubt me and stuff. But after the performance that I had, it's like I get so much love from so many different, outlets and so many different people from so many different places. It's, absolutely amazing. And I think it has to do with, obviously being everything being shut down, it's bringing more light into the UFC and, giving me guys like me more exposure. So 100% I believe that it's bringing more attention to the UFC, which is great for guys like me and other guys that are up and coming and need it. They're taking these short notice fights and just, one day nobody knows who you are, and the next day you took a short notice fight and you beat somebody that that you weren't expected to beat, and now everybody knows who you are.
All right. Where can the people find you on social media, Justin? Julian, my bad. I'm sorry.
No worries, man. No worries. All the time. Obviously Instagram, Julian Erosa 3 on Instagram, Julian Erosa just on Facebook. I think I'm Juicy J on Twitter. My wife does most of my Twitter stuff. I'm hardly ever on that. But yeah, just obviously if you just type in Julian Erosa, it'll pop up on any of the social medias. But follow me, check me out if you're interested in knowing when my next fight is and what I got going on.
All right, man. Hey,
appreciate you guys for having me on the show and kind of getting the word out.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Hell yeah.
All right, guys. I'll do it for us here. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.